The United States has once again shown the world that its actions are not constrained by international law. The attack on Venezuela is a perfect example of how a powerful country can act without consequence, while other nations simply express their deep concern. Concern is cheap, it has no teeth, and it changes absolutely nothing. Every day that powerful countries fail to take action, the US sees it as permission to continue these attacks. The world is watching, and the next moves of other nations will determine whether the US continues to operate as it pleases or whether there will be real consequences for ignoring the sovereignty of smaller nations. The truth is, there are tools available to push back against illegal actions without sending troops into combat. Countries can use economic, financial, and diplomatic levers to apply real pressure on the US, and the time to use them is now. One of the first levers is trade restrictions. Countries can impose tariffs or outright bans on American exports, and this is a strategic move because the US exports high value goods like technology, agricultural products, and aerospace equipment. Disrupting these supply chains would hurt the US companies that rely on foreign markets. It would also send a clear message that illegal attacks have costs. Imagine if multiple countries coordinated and targeted sectors that make up a large portion of US exports. American companies would feel the pressure, investors would start questioning risk, and the economy would notice. Trade is not just about buying and selling, it's about leverage. Countries that understand this could turn economic interdependence into a tool to protect global stability and sovereignty. The second lever is financial sanctions. Many people underestimate how much the US depends on the global financial system. Countries could limit American access to their banking systems or block US dollar transactions in international trade. The US dollar is the backbone of global commerce right now, and restricting its use would disrupt American businesses, investors, and governments that rely on foreign capital flows. This is not a small punishment. It makes a real impact. It affects real economic activity and forces policymakers to reconsider aggressive actions like those taken against Venezuela. A coordinated global approach to currency and banking could make the cost of unilateral military or economic interventions significantly higher. Energy embargoes are a real way that countries can put pressure on each other. The United States produces a lot of oil and gas itself, but it still relies on the global market to keep prices stable. Countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, or China could limit exports or delay cooperation on energy projects. That would make fuel more expensive in the US and show that global energy supplies are not guaranteed. High energy costs don't just affect the government, they hit ordinary people, especially. Prices influence how people vote, how companies behave, and what consumers can afford. Using energy as a tool creates pressure without sending soldiers into battle, and it forces policymakers to respond to real consequences fast. Investment freezes can also be applied. Countries could block American firms from acquiring local companies or restrict US participation in critical infrastructure projects. This would limit US economic influence abroad and affect sectors like technology, banking, and manufacturing that depend on global expansion. When a nation cannot buy or invest in key resources or projects, it changes how corporations and government actors behave. They start factoring in political risk into their decisions, slowing aggressive interventions. This lever is not just economic, it is geopolitical. It communicates that sovereignty and security cannot be traded for investment opportunities. For example, allowing for foreign corporations unrestricted access to strategic infrastructure like Starlink would be a mistake for any country, especially for South Africa. That system could be used to control domestic data, monitor citizens, and weaken national sovereignty, similar to the way Venezuela's resources were exploited. Diplomatic and travel sanctions are another option. Countries can expel US diplomats, they can restrict visa issuance, or freeze government level cooperation agreements. While this might appear symbolic, it actually carries real weight. Diplomats who are limited in movement and access cannot negotiate, influence, or promote US agendas effectively. Restricting travel, especially for elite policymakers, also isolates the country politically, undermining their soft power. Combined with other measures, these sanctions form a clear statement. Illegal attacks on other nations are unacceptable. If the world stands silent, it only encourages more aggression. A country that acts as a global police force without accountability cannot expect respect or cooperation from other nations indefinitely. Controlling key commodities is a powerful way to apply pressure. The US relies on imports like rare earth minerals, semiconductors, and agricultural inputs for manufacturing. Countries that restrict these exports can create shortages, they can slow production and disrupt industries. China, for example, dominates rare earth minerals, which affects US electronics and defense manufacturing. Limiting access sends a clear message. Global resources cannot be exploited without consequences. When this approach is combined with financial or trade measures, it becomes even more effective, showing that economic leverage can protect national interests and force powerful countries to rethink how they operate globally. Finally, coordinated multilateral sanctions are essential. If multiple countries act together through the UN or regional alliances, they could enforce broader penalties like freezing US sovereign assets abroad or limiting access to international financial institutions. Multilateral sanctions are more impactful because they carry legitimacy and they demonstrate that the international community will not tolerate unilateral aggression. Combined with trade, energy, investment, and diplomatic actions, they could substantially disrupt US strategic calculations. The purpose is not to start a war, it is to protect global peace and national sovereignty. Ordinary citizens everywhere, especially in Venezuela, suffer when aggressive powers act unchecked. The world cannot continue to simply express concern. The choice is now clear. Let the US continue its rampage or step in decisively for peace and sovereignty.